Done showing new songs, I'm righting some old wrongs. I'm sick of the underdog, I'm ready for new odds. Kiss and then run out, I'm sorry I'm burnt out. Need a new hideout, this crib's getting cramped now.
I don't mind keeping my hands on the tides, fronting bands and sharpening knives, thrown into fire. I keep my calm till it's time, celebrating the worst nights of my life.
Put your little trinkets on your mom's bamboo shelf, she collects them as you try to collect yourself. Another episode, another fist in the wall. You'll end up on mine, I'll be your last call. We're holed up for one more winter in New England. It might be time to pray, just to say you're thinking of him. You memorize landlines, you dodge social landmines, the last of your kind. And weekends they felt bad when you're so hell-bent. Summers in the bathroom of your town country club, eating chips on the porch while your best friend throws up. You'll laugh someday, just not today. It'll go away, I swear it goes away.
I keep time, using sticks to draw lines. I'm stuck in Wampatuck, getting lost on my bike. Snowed in at school, can't say the world wasn't cruel to kind eyes and wild minds.
Showing new songs, I'm righting some old wrongs. I'm sick of the underdog, I'm ready for new odds. Kiss and then run out, I'm sorry I'm burnt out. I need a new hideout, this crib's getting cramped now.
Okay, back on WGMU. That was Winter in New England by Nighthawk. I hope you liked that. That was the first sneak listen. So we have both already heard this, so I hope you, all our listeners out there, liked that. And on the air right now, my camera's off, but we have Colter from Nighthawk. So I will let, I guess, Alex take the wheel. She has some questions for you.
Sounds great.
It's gonna be awesome. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so first, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I am obsessed with Winter in New England. I have listened to it like 8 times, writing my questions for you today. So for all our listeners out there, Nighthawk consists of Colter Adams and Peyton Semgen. They're a DC-based indie rock band that draws inspiration from Edward Hopper's paintings while overlaying their own experiences. The project of Nighthawk revolves around the question, what do Edward Hopper's paintings sound like? So, the first question I have for you today is, why did you choose Edward Hopper as your inspiration?
Oh, the critical question. So, yeah, it sort of goes back to, I feel like everything in the last 3 or 4 years, the COVID context, because Peyton and I we both went to college in Maine at a tiny little liberal arts school called Bowdoin. And we were really excited about it because we were like, oh, this will be great. We'll go out into the country, we'll go on all these hikes, meet all these really cool outdoorsy people, play in bands, make music. And then we show up at school and we're only about, allowed to see pretty much 8 people at a time for about 6 months. And so I think we just started getting really in our own head and started, looking at a lot of old art, a lot of kind of nostalgia trips to old music and art independently. We really didn't know each other very well. And we eventually sort of wound up in the same social house, which are sort of one of the few places where people were allowed to come together on campus. And we both played music, and so we met that way, and we would kind of get together and jam and play songs. And eventually we were both just sort of sharing how we had both sort of fallen into this Edward Hopper obsession, because his paintings are so focused on kind of themes of isolation and social disconnect, and it was really resonating for both of us. So we were like, well, what if we took that and just completely ran with it? And then over the course of about maybe a year and a half, we wrote maybe 10 or 11 songs set in Edward Hopper's paintings. And the idea was to have it be sort of this cohesive concept album where, you know, it followed these same characters, but over time it sort of melded into, you know, little bits and pieces of stories that never fully intersected, but occasionally come together. So that's, I guess, sort of the Edward Hopper backdrop.
Awesome. And then your name also comes from an Edward Hopper painting called Nighthawk. What chose you? What made you guys choose Nighthawk as the name for the band and as the painting that kind of created the band's name?
Oh my gosh. Well, this is like an ongoing inside joke for us, which is like, at what point is it too late to change our name? Because if you don't know Edward Hopper, then I feel like the first thing that comes to mind when you hear Nighthawk is like an 80s dad rock band. So like we're going to pull out, you know, like hair metal, like loud guitars and do that kind of thing. So, but I think I've settled into it, and now it feels like sort of a fun oxymoron if you don't know the painting, and obviously well suited if you do, because Nighthawk is taken from the painting Nighthawks by Edward Hopper, which features this couple sitting in a cafe across from a bartender in a sort of deserted cityscape in New York.
Awesome. And then, so for your new single, Winter in New England, which comes out tomorrow, October 18th, Sumjin stated in the press release that the song reflects Hopper's art as well as her own childhood memories and urban isolation. What is the process that you use to blend Hopper's art with your own experiences in the songs?
Yeah, so, well, this is kind of an interesting aspect of our songwriting process, because, you know, I think at this point we've adopted a lot of the aesthetics of Hopper's work in our songs without necessarily getting as specific as the paintings. So, you know, Edward Hopper spent a long time, you know, painting in New England. He did scenes in Maine. He did scenes on the coast of Cape Cod. And then, of course, New York City, which is sort of outside the New England region. But you get a sort of similar sense of these long, cold winters and these windows that are framed in really compelling ways to invite you inside these buildings where you can see the sort of inner lives of people, shielded behind, you know, the sort of seasonal sadness that comes with winter. And so I think this one reflects that. You know, the song is, I think Peyton would be most honest to describe it as, you know, about, I think she had this in a line somewhere, but it's about her delinquent friends in high school struggling to get through senior year in suburbia. So it's like, you know, conceptually, it's a song about her own experiences and growing up and, you know, sort of drifting towards the college path and having a lot of her friends who are more into music and art sort of falter and fall through the cracks at school, which I think is something that a lot of us have or continue to experience, you know, people who are really into art and trying to decide if they're going to pursue that. And it can be a really challenging thing. But then also you have these sort of aesthetics of Hopper's painting, right? Like you have all of these notes of urban isolation. You have, you know, there's lyrics in there that it's sort of this back and forth between these two characters who are sort of isolated in their own worlds. And it all comes together in that chorus where we're holed up, you know, for one more winter in New England. So I think this one sort of takes the aesthetics of Hopper's paintings, but then prints, you know, Peyton's own personal story about growing up and sort of what happened to her and some of her close friends in elementary and middle school and brings them together.
Awesome. And then moving away from like the Hopper specific questions, I have a few general questions.
Totally.
So you said that the two of you met back in university. Was it like COVID and just kind of the fact that you couldn't see a lot of other people that led you to make music together, or was there something else?
I think there is something else. I mean, it's always hard to say, right? Because I feel like most music connections that last are in some ways serendipitous. But I think we think really similarly about music. Neither of us have music theory backgrounds or sort of extensive professional training, but for both of us, music is this incredibly personal thing and something that we use to, you know, decompress and reflect and, you know, kind of move through life. And so I think both of us think about music as really storytelling above all else, right? A way to communicate. And I think that's really helped us as a songwriting pair. We also, you know, I write lyrics and Peyton writes instrumentals, but we usually in this project default towards Peyton writing a lot of the lyrics and me writing a lot of the instrumentals. So in that way, you know, the music that we write together is this sort of conversation of Peyton writing these lines and me sort of responding and shaping musical parts to her lines. And and going back and forth. So I think there are definitely some natural fits in the way that we write, and things that we continue to find out about each other's songwriting process that just really fit snugly. And we joke oftentimes that we're sort of like, like long lost siblings. Like we have a lot of the same tendencies, just like how we act in social situations, and our love for scary movies and our love for a lot of the same art. And so I think that comes up as well. So I'd like to think that that's a really good question, and I'd like to think that we would definitely have written together regardless of whether or not we were isolated in the same house. Although, who's really to say?
That's awesome. And then while the two of you are the head of Nighthawk, you also have a rotating cast of band members that contribute. So what does that collaboration process look like?
Yeah, it's varied a lot with the band. So we started playing as Nighthawk officially in Maine when we were at college, and we had two lead guitarists who had very different styles. We have Zach, who does much more of a sort of country alternative rock thing, and then Alex, who's much more Maine down the line rock. And both of their styles have shaped different songs that they've recorded on. And we've had a lot of great musicians come through the project who are not listening to Waxahachie and Indigo D'Souza like Peyton and I are. And so, there's always that sort of clash of styles. And I think it makes really interesting music to try to force yourself to collaborate with people who don't necessarily listen to the same kinds of songs that you do. But yeah, recently we've gone through a new round of reshuffling, because a lot of our band is still up in the Northeast, and we're setting up in the DC area to be performing locally. So we've got a new violinist named Emma, who is now in the band, and she's incredible. And she's actually going to be playing at our debut show in this sort of incarnation of the bands on Friday in Alexandria.
Awesome.
Tomorrow.
Yes. so that is happening. And then it's a free show, and yeah, that's going on. But we've also got a drummer, Jacob, who's got a really cool style, a little jazzy, a little folky. Our drummer back up in school, Courtney, is incredible, and she's got this really hard rock, like driving punk energy that I think adds so much to the band. And so it's always a bit of like, oh my gosh, this is a totally new thing when we have an instrumentalist coming with a very different style. But I'm excited to see what Jacob's going to bring to the project. And yeah, we've got a lot of shifting around, but the common thread is, all incredible musicians who have very distinctive styles. So it's been really fun to work with all of them.
That's awesome. And then, so as you mentioned, you're currently DC based, but you came from Maine. So what compelled you to move down here to DC?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think for one thing, Maine's music scene is definitely an incredible thing. You have artists that Peyton and I still sort of see as mentors, and Louis Stancioff and Dead Gowns and some others. But it is a very small scene, and it's a little bit disconnected. Like, you really have to get down into Boston to play a lot of shows. And I think we also want to start getting involved in the music scene down south and get to play in Nashville and Virginia, where a lot of our favorite bands are based out of. And so and Nashville, of course. And so I think partly it's convenient in that sense. And then also Peyton and I are both Gov majors. We both graduated with Gov degrees, and there's a lot more employment opportunities for the day job with Gov degrees in the DC area than in Brunswick, Maine. So that's definitely part of it too. But I think for both of us, we're really serious about this, and we're prioritizing it. And I think this sort of checked off both of those boxes of we get to be in a much more accessible music scene, in terms of just meeting more bands and having more places to play, and then also, be able to pay for housing while we do music at night and on the weekends.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as a journalism major who came to DC for the same day job reasons, totally get that. And then in your opinion, what is the biggest difference between the DC music scene and the music scene in more northeastern cities such as Portland, Boston, and New York City?
Oh, these are such good questions. So, I hope there aren't a lot of other bands listening right now that would, I'm sure have very, very different. But I think that the Northeast is a little bit more kind of college centered, if that makes sense. Like, especially in Boston, like there aren't a lot of small to mid-range venues that are accessible for up and coming bands to play in. And so a lot of the shows that happen in the Northeast are, in college houses or in dorms or in these kind of house venues that open up for a year and then get shut down or closed down. And so it's a lot more informal. It's a lot more like, who do you know in the scene, and sort of, below board. And that can make it really cool once you start to meet people, and really difficult if you're, you don't really have a sound that sort of fits that niche, like that sort of alternative indie rock niche as much. But a really amazing scene. And, some of our favorite bands have come out of the Northeast. We played on tour with this artist Chrysalis, and with a band out of New Hampshire called Sneaky Miles. And both of those artists are just extraordinary, like some of the best music I've ever heard. And would definitely recommend interviewing them next time they're down in the area if you get a chance. But then I think the DC music scene is interesting because it's a lot bigger in the sense that there's a lot more venues and a lot more of those sort of small, mid-sized venues. Like, you've got the Black Cat, you've got DC9, you've got Songbird and Pie Shop and The Pocket, like all these venues that are very accessible for smaller bands to play in. And I think it's made it a hot spot for touring for smaller bands. But I think the DC music scene itself sort of waxes and wanes. Like, you have sort of periods of time where it's really alive and moving really fast, and then, rent gets expensive, or people sort of move to the traditional music cities, and then suddenly there aren't as many local bands. So it's a dynamic scene, and I'm excited to be a part of it. But yeah, very, very different, I would say. I think stylistically, I would say that the Northeast is a little bit more kind of like emo, alternative, like punk, that kind of stuff. Like, I feel like the quintessential band I would give as an example of like the indie scene up there would be this band called Dino Gala. Like this sort of heavy and a little bit morose, like kind of cloudy day music, but really, really melodic and beautiful. And then DC, I feel like, has a lot more sort of traditional rock, and you get that sort of pull from the South with the roots music and, really great guitar work and some of the more like R&B type stuff too. So I'd say a little bit more eclectic, a little bit more of a range of genres. But that's just me. You'd have to ask someone else too.
Okay, and then some questions about winter in New England. So since you guys are from Maine, was it Maine's winters that you had in mind while writing Winter in New England, or was it just an overarching concept based on Edward Hopper's paintings?
Yeah, it's definitely winter in New England. I think that's sort of what I was alluding to when I was talking about how we've combined some of the aesthetics of his work with our own experiences. I think this song is ultimately lyrically a lot from Peyton's own experiences. She grew up in Hingham, Mass, and she went through. This is funny saying this on her behalf. I'm sure she's gonna have a lot of questions for me after this, but she went through a lot of phases in high school. She was in theater, and then she, recorded her own music in her room, and then also was doing sort of the academic track stuff. So I think she was exposed to a lot of different people. And I think the song is sort of like a meditation on that, and also on her experiences of like, when you're in New England, and I can attest to this now, having gone to school in Maine for 4 years, like, there's pretty much a 7-month period of time where you are not outside unless you're moving from one place to another place. And so I think that aesthetic carries through probably both with Hopper's paintings, which, oftentimes feature, views from the outside, right? Like, you're looking through a window, or you're looking through these thick walls, and it's a lot of, humanscapes, right? Not necessarily like rural or like natural landscapes, but also definitely from our experience in Maine. Like, I mean, we lived in this tower. We have a song called Cole's Tower, which has some similar themes, but we lived in this huge tower in Brunswick, Maine, which is where they put a lot of the student housing for some reason, because there's really no reason to have, a huge tower in a rural area with lots of developable land. But, we lived there, and there's probably a 2-month window when it was like literally getting above 0 degrees, maybe like for an hour or two every week or something like that. And so everything we did for those 2 months was essentially like in this tower that we were living in, or in our classrooms. And so, yeah, there's definitely a sort of sense of entrapment, but sometimes like you get a little bit claustrophobic. But it definitely makes for good songwriting inspiration, I think.
And then how long did writing and recording Winter in New England take?
Yeah, another good question. So, yeah, with this one, we wrote it and recorded it really quickly. So I had an idea for a guitar part that I sent over like voice memo. There's like a conversation happening in the background, and I just like quickly like pulled out my phone and recorded this little guitar part on like a borrowed guitar that I'd managed to find in like the corner of this house. And I sent it to Peyton, and Peyton was like, "This is really cool." And then we sort of sat on it. And I think in the 3 intervening months, Peyton started to play around with some starter lyrics to it. And then 3 weeks ago, we opened up that file again and decided that we were going to turn it into a fully fleshed out song. And then we wrote and recorded it in maybe a 6-hour period. And then I mixed and mastered it, or mixed it, and then had a friend of ours master it, in like probably the same amount of time. So definitely an interesting story. I think with a song like that, you might have expected more of a winter release date, but I think it would be disingenuous for us to release it, that far out, given that we did in like 2 minutes.
So fair. And then at the beginning of the song, you use a sample from the play 12 Angry Men, which Seumjin was cast to perform in her high school's version before it was canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. What is the significance of the sample, and what made you guys add it to the beginning of the song?
Yeah, so this is my little contribution in sort of the last stages of the song. But so Peyton was in that play, or she was cast to be in that play, and her version of it was called 12 Angry Jurors for gender parity's sake. But unfortunately, the show is canceled because of COVID, and so she never actually got to perform it. And so I pulled a sample from a professional theater rendition of the play. And so it's fitting from the standpoint of, this song is about Peyton sort of finding out what happens to all of her theater friends over the course of high school, and sort of like not being really sure if she wants to fall in with the crowd because, there's some of her best friends from earlier on, but, kind of headed in a different trajectory than she is, and sort of the tensions that come out of that. So it felt really fitting that there would be some theater reference at the top of the song. And then I think the play itself is also just kind of befitting because, it's essentially a play about human nature, right? Like masquerading as a play about legal procedure, because you over the course of the play, it's basically just a conversation between these 12 people that happens in a single room for the entire runtime. And you realize that whatever flaws this, defendant has, are dwarfed by just all of the little personal, complications and the relationships between the jurors as they develop over the course of the trial. So I thought it was kind of a nice little thematic touch too, because you get, that sort of sense of you write a song about winter in New England, but who really is responsible for the vibe of winter, right? Of that feeling of being, missing your friends and feeling lonely and all those things. Like, those are human feelings. Those aren't really seasonal. Like it's just sort of this thing that we've hitched on to, the season as if it's attributable to that. So I think that's why the play felt like it was a good fit.
Yeah, for sure. And then did Winter in New England go through any crazy evolution between the initial version that you guys wrote and the final song that's being released tomorrow?
Definitely. Yeah, you should save that question for any band that you interview, because I'm sure you get really, really interesting answers. So this one started as basically an acoustic song, and it was just going to be very simple. I was going to sort of play that opening riff for the entirety of the song, and it would be kind of a poetic thing where Peyton would sing the various parts, and the instrumentals wouldn't change too much, and it would be really lyrically focused. And then, I started having too much fun with the structure of the song, and over the course of writing it, we decided to turn it into less of sort of just Peyton's, describing her experiences, and more of a back and forth. Like, it sort of became this alt rock duet. And then at that point, we're like, all right, if we're going for angsty alt rock duet, we've got to have some drums. We've got to have some searing lead guitar lines. And so it definitely built up. And I'm excited to try to perform this one live at some point, because I think that it's like a lot of our songs, something that could evolve between the recording and the live performance.
And then do you have a favorite production memory?
Ooh, probably pulling out the lead guitar line that happens on the verses where I'm singing. I tuned my guitar probably 3 different ways over the course of the song, which has made it a real headache to go back and try to figure out how I want to play it live. But there's like some bizarre tuning that I'd pulled out for that verse, and I was able to kind of come up with this lead line that I don't think I'd be able to play without that tuning exactly. So I think that was a fun moment that I'll probably come to regret at some point.
And then for your upcoming second EP, you collaborated with Colin Miller, a producer who has worked with the likes of Indigo D'Souza, Wednesday, and MJ Lenderman. What was it like getting to work with Miller?
Yeah, so this is actually, and pardon me for the phrasing there, because we've yet to record the EP. So we're going to go down to Asheville in January and spend a couple days in the studio with Colin Miller. So you'll have to ask me again after that what the actual collaboration period was like. But that being said, we did get a chance to work with him on Casual Fatality, which is a song we've released. And he did the mixing and mastering for it. And he has a really incredible style. Like, I think everyone in that Asheville scene is just so in their own league in terms of the creativity that they're bringing to indie rock music. But he's got this sort of like gritty griminess that he's able to extract from the songs that make them feel very lived in, but at the same time, like, make them feel like high budget, like, car speaker worthy at the same time. So I think that's something that I'm really excited to explore. Is we've been writing songs, and we've got a couple that we're actually debuting at the show coming up, and the rest of the shows on our calendar. But I'm excited to sort of see how that aesthetic touch shapes the production process, because I have a feeling that he's going to bring some really creative ideas to the recording process.
And then is there anything that we should know about the upcoming EP, such as like the sound, when it'll be released, any pretty much anything?
Yeah, well, the fact that you even know that it's happening means you're a step ahead of most of the people that we've talked to about music. So yeah, we don't have a announced release date yet, but we are anticipating, probably early summer, or late summer, maybe early fall, depending on sort of what it all looks like. But we're probably going to be looking at 5 to 6 new songs, and we'll be recording them all in that session. We're definitely going to have strings on them too, and I think probably some similar stylistic choices to our prior EP, Everything Good Ends, but I think this one is going to be a little bit more sort of folky and songwriter focused, maybe a little bit less sort of like full band push. Although you never know what could happen between now and 3 months from now in terms of these songs. But definitely expect some interesting production elements. It's not going to be us singing over acoustic guitar. There's definitely going to be a full instrumental palette. But I think there's going to be a little bit more range in terms of sort of the genres that we cover compared to what we've done up to this point.
And okay, that's all the questions I have prepared for you today. Do you have any final comments, questions for me or our listeners, or pretty much anything else?
Yeah, no, just to say thank you so much for having me on and for playing the song. And yeah, the song comes out on the 18th, and it'll be out on all platforms, available for streaming then. And yeah, we're really excited. We've got a whole bunch of shows coming up on our calendar. You can find it on our Instagram too. We're doing a Halloween party on Halloween proper at a little house venue in DC, and we've got a bunch of other stuff in the calendar. So excited about all that. And yeah, thank you so much for having us on. Super excited to release this song tomorrow.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing your new single with us. Again, to all our listeners, Winter in New England comes out tomorrow, so make sure to listen to it. If you liked what you heard, go follow them on Instagram, nighthawk.band. Go follow, look at their shows, get tickets, get out there.
And to round it all off, we're going to play Winter in New England one more time to give you a complete contextual listen with all the knowledge that you just got from your interview. Alex, do you want to add anything else?
No, that's pretty much all. I'm just so happy that I got to talk to Nighthawk. This song is amazing. And support local music.
Yeah, support local music. And if you get the chance to catch them, they are having a show tomorrow in Alexandria, I think at the Evening Star Cafe, I think it's called. And then also, again, as he said, on Halloween. And since they're in the area, we'll be seeing them all the time. And hopefully we'll have them in the studio again at some point. So here is Winter in New England. You've been listening to WGMU. Thank you so much to Nighthawk. Thank you so much to Alex for doing the interviewing and the journalism. Also her first time in the studio.
Yes.
So incredible. But yeah, here is Winter in New England by Nighthawk, available on all streaming platforms tomorrow on WGME Radio, your voice amplified.
What a racket that is! Hey, filling people's head with all that junk.
I'm done showing new songs. I'm righting some old wrongs. I'm sick of the underdog. I'm ready for new odds. Kiss and then run out. I'm sorry I'm burnt out. Need a new hideout. This crib's getting cramped now.
I don't mind keeping my hands on the tides, fronting bands, sharpening knives, thrown into fire. I keep my calm till it's time, celebrating the worst nights of my life.
She little trinkets on your mom's bamboo shelf. She collects them as you try to collect yourself. Another episode, another fist in the wall. You'll end up online. I'll be your last call. We're holed up for one more winter in New England. It might be time to pray, just to say you're thinking of him. You memorize landlines, you dodge social landmines, the last of your kind. And weekends they felt bad when you're so hell-bent. Summers in the bathroom of your town country club, eating chips on the porch while your best friend throws up. You'll laugh someday, just not today. It'll go away, I swear it goes away.
I keep time, using sticks to draw lines. I'm stuck in Wampatuck, getting lost on my bike. Snowed in at school, can't say the world wasn't cruel to kind eyes and wild
I'm
minds.
showing new songs, I'm righting some old wrongs. I'm sick of the underdog, I'm ready for new odds. Kiss and then run out, I'm sorry I'm burnt